Hello and welcome. In this video, we'll be discussing how to answer topicality when you are the affirmative. In this video, we'll review what topicality is. Next, we'll go through how to answer topicality, and then we'll talk about how to extend your answers throughout the debate. So what is topicality? Well, the name says it all. Topicality, or T, is a debate about whether the affirmative is on topic. This is an argument that makes sure the affirmative is following the rules or norms of debate and offering an affirmative plan that falls under the resolution. It's important to note that topicality is about whether the affirmative team's plan is on topic, not discussing the advantage areas or the solvency they choose to debate. Topicality is ultimately a debate about debate. What topics should we discuss, and why should we discuss them? Thinking critically about what you talk about as a debater and why you do so will help you in a topicality debate. Remember, every topicality argument has three parts. The interpretation, which outlines what the limits of the topic should be, specifically the part that the negative is going to challenge the affirmative on. The violation, which is what the affirmative does wrong, and the standards. Why is this a problem? If you think of these three parts as uniqueness, link, and impact, you'll be able to conceptualize it as a disadvantage. So how do you answer topicality in the 2AC? Well, there are four main ways to do it. First, by reading a counter-interpretation. Second, by making we meet arguments. Third, by debating standards. And fourth, by discussing reasonability. First, let's talk about counterinterpretations. Offering one or more counterinterpretations is a surefire way to engage the negative on topicality and defend your case. This means reading a definition or definitions that include your affirmative. This is similar to offering a counterplan. Once a counterinterpretation has been introduced, the two ideas get compared to one another and the results of each are considered. The interpretation that produces the better topic for debate usually wins the round. A good counterinterpretation, first, has to make the affirmative topical. Second, is specific to the violation in question. Third, thinks about the other cases. Does it make many affirmatives topical, especially many, quote, mainstream cases that everyone else is reading? Does it pass the gut check? Lastly, don't expand the topic too much without a good reason to do so. Some counterinterpretations are so broad that they end up being bad ideas, even if they make the specific affirmative you're reading topical. Next, let's talk about we meet arguments. Topicality violations may sound clear-cut when the negative starts reading them, but that doesn't mean they always are. The negative, especially if they aren't familiar with the details of your case, may claim that you're saying something that you aren't. If so, it's okay to simply accept the negative interpretation of what topicality cases should look like and make the argument you fit under their interpretation. This is often done by referencing your solvency evidence, your plan, and their definition, explaining how your case works and how you can agree with their definition. This can be a trap, however, since they're getting you to agree to a specific definition of what your plan does that could be used against you later. Let's talk about standards. When defending a counterinterpretation, it often comes down to the standards debate. Which case is better for education and fairness? First, you can play defense, arguing that the standards brought up by the other team are irrelevant. For example, if the negative team says that the affirmative is unpredictable, the affirmative can respond that unpredictability is inevitable. You can also play offense, arguing that the standards brought up by the other team are actually good. For example, if the negative says that the affirmative is unpredictable, you can turn that against them, saying that unpredictability is a good idea. It causes critical thinking skills, and that in-round adaptation is a greater source of education and learning in a debate than all of the pre-round preparation put together. Lastly, let's talk about reasonability. In some ways, this is best thought of as impact defense on topicality. Reasonability is simply the argument that the affirmative is close enough, so even if there are some technical issues with the case crossing definitional lines, there's no harm done, and we are close enough to the topic that we shouldn't lose on topicality. When arguing reasonability, it's important to consider the following. First, whether we should focus on the harms or abuse done by the affirmative in the current debate round, or whether we should focus on the hypothetical harm to future teams in future rounds that are justified by our interpretation of the topic. Second, discussing the rest of the negative strategy. Did the potential untopicality of the affirmative impact the negative team in any way? Did they waste time they wouldn't have reading bad arguments? Did they have specific links to the affirmative case? Did they waste their time or their pre-round prep? Lastly, arguing that the judge is subjective, so that a highly detailed decision should err toward the affirmative. This is especially useful later in the year if, quote, most judges have agreed that your affirmative is topical. So let's get into answering topicality. First, you'll start your answers in the 2AC. It's important to make lots of answers, but to not take a lot of time doing so. The negative may have no intention of trying to win the debate on topicality. So they might just want to win a time trade-off and beat you on an argument that you undercover because you spent so much time answering T. It's always sound to offer a counter-interpretation, make several we meet arguments, citing their definition when you can, argue some standards, and make sure to put in a plug for reasonability, that you're close enough and there's no harm done. The 1AR is where topicality gets hard for the affirmative. Based on how much time the negative spends on topicality in the block, you'll know how much of a threat it is at the end of the debate. Depending on what you have time for, make as many arguments as possible. Have either a we meet or a counter-interpretation argument at a minimum, and engage the standards debate. First, extend your counter-interpretation. Choose one or two reasons why it's a better standard to judge the debate, and answer any arguments they've made. Remember to keep it short and sweet. Next, extend your most persuasive we meet argument, and answer any arguments they made against it. Lastly, engage in the most offensive standards that prefer the affirmative, and make sure you have some offense coming into the 2AR. In the 2AR, this is an all-or-nothing argument. If the negative goes for T in the 2NR, you only need to have a two-sentence summary of your affirmative, and then you should spend the rest of your speech answering the 2NR. First, extend your counter-interpretation and any we meet arguments that you brought through in the 1AR. Answer any arguments that they made against you in the 2NR. Lastly, discuss the standards and the reasonability arguments. This is the impact debate. Why is your interpretation better? Why should your affirmative be considered part of the topic? And what are the benefits of your interpretation? In the JV division, the interpretations must stay the same. Topicality is substantial, increase versus create, and education. This gives the affirmative some predictability about what the negative will say. However, you can do new research to defend your case. New counterinterpretation evidence can expand and improve your definitions to help include specific affirmatives in the topic. New we meet evidence can include your case in their definitions, and new standards can provide additional reasons why the affirmative is not cheating.